Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the Equal Rights Commission's monthly Lunch and Learn. Today, we are very excited to have some information that can enlighten all of us about our Muslim faith community. So my name is Mai Hua, and I am one of the commissioner on the Equal Rights Commission. And so we are very thankful to have a wonderful friend who will help us moderate our Lunch and Learn today. This gentleman does not need many introductions, but I'm going to do a very brief introduction of him in case we have individuals that have not met him. And then he will introduce our speakers for the afternoon. With us is Pardeep Singh Kalika. Oh, I'm already messing up his last name, Kalika. He's the executive director of the Interfaith Conference of Greater Milwaukee. He is an established individual in the community. He has published books, especially he is the author of The Gifts of Our Wounds, an award-winning columnist with the Milwaukee Independent and clinician specializing in utilizing a trauma-informed approach to treat survivors and perpetrators of assault, abuse, and acts of violence. So without further ado, I give it to you, Pardeep.
Thank you so much, Mahua, and thank you to the Equal Rights Commission for putting this together and moving forward with our Lunch and Learn series. I look forward to working with everyone. I'm super excited for today's discussion. And I want to wish everyone out there Ramadan Mubarak, happy Vaisakhi, happy holy days. I mean, this is a time, and spring is a time of high holy days, and I just want to wish everyone blessings and love. And without further ado, I'm going to introduce our panelists today for our Lunch and Learn series on the Muslim faith. First off, Athman Atta. He's the current director at the Islamic Society of Milwaukee, which operates 3 houses of worship, including a full-time K-12 school. He's also adjunct faculty at Cardinal Stritch University and a board member for the American Arab Anti-Discrimination Committee, as well as serving on many other civil rights boards in the state of Wisconsin. Athman is an attorney who has been working in private practice for over 20 years now, and has dedicated his life to serving the greater good by building interreligious relationships and living his faith as a Muslim. Welcome, Athman. And Janan Najib, who is a tireless advocate for social justice and interreligious understanding in Wisconsin. She was instrumental in founding the Milwaukee Muslim Women's Coalition, the Milwaukee Muslim Film Festival, the Wisconsin Muslim Journal, the Islamic Resource Center, a national model for building bridges of understanding between Islam and other faiths, and Our Peaceful Home, a family strengthening and domestic violence agency. In 2016, she was the first Muslim to ever offer prayers before the Wisconsin State Assembly. She is currently on the boards and committees of 15 organizations, including chairing the Interfaith Conference's Committee for Interfaith Understanding. Welcome, Janan. Welcome to you both.
Thank you.
So I want to get right into the questions, and I want to encourage everyone that's out there and has questions to ask them as they come up, as they come to your hearts and minds. And I will look over and I will try to keep track of some of those questions as they arise. We want this to be a free-flowing conversation, and we definitely want to get to your questions as quickly as we can. For the first question I have for Janan, and with this, Janan and Athman, if you have something that you want to add on to the other person's question, by no means is there ownership of any questions. So we can definitely go back and forth with all of that. First question, Janan, there's a diversity of culture within the adherents of Islam. Muslims speak many different languages and come from many different countries. Can you tell us more about that?
Sure. And thank you, Pardeep. And first of all, I'd like to thank the Equal Rights Commission for inviting me. I'm very excited, and I think this is very important as we recognize all of the different communities that make up Milwaukee. I'd like to excuse me, thank my friend Maihua, who I've known for quite a while, and you, of course, Pardeep, and welcome. Actually, you know, we need to be very clear. My brother, hey, so it's great to see everyone. For your question regarding the diversity, as we know that Islam is considered probably the most diverse faith in the United States. You know, I think that's really important because of the, you know, Muslims don't come from any one particular country. They come from, of course, a variety of different countries. And so you have not only immigrants and refugees and second generation and third generation, but you also have the African Americans that originally came here 400 years ago, you know, as slaves. We have history tells us about almost 40% that were brought here were actually Muslim. And so although many of them lost their faith, there was a period of time in the last century where quite a number came into Islam. And there are those that have reverted, of course, from other faiths. What's interesting, I think, about having such a diversity is that we still, as Muslims, try to come together within one mosque, you know, and this is across the United States. Sometimes when you have large populations of one particular, you know, language group that speaks one particular language, they may tend to gather within one mosque. But in general, we can go to any mosque. There's no, you know, there's no stipulation that because you speak a certain language or you're ethnically from a different culture, that you should just go to a particular mosque. So we will go to any one mosque. But think about it this way. Sometimes people within the same family have differing opinions. So imagine when you've got, you know, a huge congregation and everyone is coming from a different country. And sometimes you've got, you know, cultural baggage that is coming along with the practices that people practice. And so there's first of all, there is a richness to it because people bring, you know, their traditions, their languages, their foods, their ethnic costumes. But there's also, you know, a sort of internal kind of dialogue that needs to take place, because sometimes people are used to practicing certain things a certain way, and then they come and they realize, well, wait a minute, what are other people doing? And so there becomes a point where you know, you really need to educate. You need to kind of, everyone has to sit and discuss why is it that we're doing things. So it's educational, but it also can be challenging at times.
Yeah,
If I
thank you,
could just,
Janan. And yeah, part of why I was so excited to have this discussion really was because sitting here and brother, sister, and family, and we all are, you know, different family. And you talk about, you know, just same families having different opinions. Athman, could you talk about the diversity of the Muslim faith and, you know,
Sure.
from both the United States and global perspective?
Sure. Muslims are considered to be the second largest group in the world, and the percentage of Muslims is approximately almost 1 out of 4 people on the face of the earth. So if you go to a think tank or a group that studies, what I usually tell people, a pretty good one is the Pew Center on Religion. And they do a lot of statistics and studies of different religions and people around the world and in the United States as well. And so the Muslim community is quite diverse internationally. And as Janan indicated, here in the United States, it's diverse as well. According to the Pew Center, and I always find this interesting, is they said that the Muslims in the United States do not have a majority race or ethnicity. So if someone says, oh, let's profile Muslims, you know, good luck, because there is no majority of Muslims from any particular group. And that's been obviously part of the immigration system here in the United States, where Muslims are coming in from different countries, family reunification from different countries, and so forth. And I think that that does provide for the Muslim community here a really positive element, because of the fact that you are dealing with people from different backgrounds. And I think that one of the most important things for me, at least, growing up here in the United States, is we truly value our backgrounds and our ethnicities and our countries of origin. And yet, as Muslims over the years begin to be more involved, you do also develop the American identity, but you don't lose your faith. So their faith remains strong. That continues, and many people will also, carry elements of their ethnicity as other religious groups that came, to the United States. So I would say overall, it's really a positive experience. And going to one of the mosques, and especially during the holidays, I mean, or when we have our gathering, our prayer gathering, sometimes at the Wisconsin Center. I mean, it's like a United Nations of people and dress and so forth. And it's really a nice thing, and you get to really appreciate others.
Yeah, and yeah, as far as that, would it be safe to say that the Muslim faith, and you talk about the uniqueness of different uh, within having the different demographics of Muslims, that it's hard to say, okay, I'm going to study that type of Islam or that type of practice, but it provides an opportunity to study the depth of all of our faiths, and how we navigate our faith and this American identity. Would it be safe to say that Muslims are one of the fastest growing demographic faiths in the United States?
According to, again, and I go back to the Pew Center on Religion, because I try to rely on credible sources. They estimate that by the year 2050, Muslims will be the second largest religious group. They will be larger than the Jewish community in terms of a population. The one thing about the Muslims in the United States now is that their age is skewed young. And so the potential then in the future tends to be greater. Although people who come to the United States tend to have, over the long run, fewer children and so forth. But still, I think the statistics show that, the Muslims are becoming more and more a part of the fabric of the United States. In some cities, they are obviously in greater number than in others. And I think that will have overall a very positive impact.
And if I can also add, just, when we talk about the fact that they are the fastest growing religion, and they're expected by 2050, to probably equal or surpass the Jewish community, just so that we're also not providing, fuel for Islamophobes. We're still an incredibly small population. So Muslims make up only 2% of the American population. So that's just something that, because if anyone knows any of the, the kind of rhetoric that comes out of Islamophobic circles, that Muslims want to take over this country. And so the idea is, of course, ludicrous, because you've got, 2% are going to take over this country. How is that possible? But yes, definitely there's a growth. And I think particularly in urban areas, more and more cities and more people that live in those cities have interacted or know Muslims. The areas, really the more rural areas, which are also the areas that don't necessarily always have a favorable view because of the fact that they don't know Muslims. That's also not where Muslims tend to generally live, because as anybody else would want to be somewhere where there's a sense of community.
Oh, thank you, Jan. Yeah, there's within the populism sort of mindset and narrative, there's that danger of, like the way of our life is not going to exist any longer. But as you pointed out, the age is skewed young. Lots of Muslims are moving into urban areas. Some of them are moving into distressed areas, and really providing a rejuvenation of some of those areas and some life. And so I think, yeah, so all of that. I want to come back to Janana. You've done a lot of work around interfaith, interreligious, and just thinking about the way that our different faiths, and we navigate our lives through our different faiths. Sometimes the question of the Abrahamic faiths gets brought up. Islam, Christianity, and Judaism are all considered Abrahamic faiths. what does that suggest that they may have in common? And this is, maybe this could be a whole discussion by itself and a whole book, and there's many theologians who have talked about this, but maybe just a cursory look at some of the similarities and some of the differences between the different faiths.
Well, yeah, absolutely. They are, Islam, Christianity, and Judaism are all considered to be the Abrahamic faiths. And the reason is that we all look to Abraham as being our father, so to speak. And for Muslims, at least from the Muslim tradition, I can tell you that we view, Christians and Jews as what is regarded in our scripture, the Quran, as people of scripture or people of the book, what's sometimes called people of the book, meaning that they are honored groups. They received scripture from God. They received prophets from God. And so as Muslims, we also believe that we're part of really the same lineage. And we share the same moral code. It's not like, one group was told, thou shalt not kill, and the other was told, yes, thou shalt kill. No, we carry the same moral code. We believe in the same God. We have the same, basically, much of the same traditions when you narrow it down. What we believe as Muslims is that the Quran remains in its original form, and it's still to this day read in the same Arabic in which it was revealed. So we whereas we respect the other faiths, and we respect and we consider the prophets of the other faiths to actually be Muslim prophets. If you're defining Muslim with the small m as one who submits to God. So we believe all of them were really in essence Muslims. And so we hold them in high regard. We have, in fact, there are more references to Moses in the Quran than there is to even Prophet Muhammad. There's an entire chapter in the Quran about Mary, the mother of Jesus, and about the family of Jesus. And so we regard them highly. And so that's also why it's interesting that, even when there have been individuals that have maligned Prophet Muhammad and made very, very derogatory remarks, that we don't respond in kind, because we have such high regard for prophets and we consider them to be our prophets as well. And so with the same idea, we consider, the Abrahamic faiths to be part of the same family.
Thank you so much, Janine. And Osman, I'm going to let you answer that question as well, because you're not only a civil servant, a public servant, a executive director, or a person that has given your life to fair law and civic law, but you are also, I consider you both very, very knowledgeable theologians and very, very, and you're scholars. Maybe talk about like how maybe your history with interfaith and interreligious just relationships, and specifically Islam, Christianity, and Judaism, all being Abrahamic faiths. What are some things that you see in common and maybe different too?
I'll tell you, my experience is, in interfaith has actually been a very, very positive one. And it really, I think, allows you, when you're having these interfaith discussions, it allows you to learn more about yourself and your faith and others, and to see how much really we are very much alike as people. So when we sit down, we have discussions, even where we have, clear theological differences, but it's always been very respectful. It's always been, very cordial. And I think that this is the model. People I believe, of different faiths, if we can show that we can get together, because we believe in a greater being, a God, that we have this ability to say, look, we can agree on, certain ethical and moral principles and values, and helping the poor and doing others. And that's what we should focus on. It's not really on the things that, we may disagree about. And again, we're not trying to be all the same. I mean, we are different, but there's a way that people can actually interact and deal with one another. And I think that interfaith has really shown, and Pardeep, you know this. I mean, you're the director, executive director of the Interfaith Conference. I mean, it's the largest, most successful interfaith organization in Wisconsin, and probably, you know, in many places in the United States. I mean, you obviously, with your background, you know, bring a lot of value, and to be able to see and meet and discuss, you know, with different people is something that's important, because ultimately, I think that what we need to combat is ignorance. We need to combat, you know, bigotry that comes from ignorance, and I really believe that people of faith especially can play an important role in that.
Thank you so much, Atman, and thank you for just the amazing compliment. And then you're right. I think what interfaith work has done for me, and learning about the way that people live their faith, you know, from Christians, Muslims, Jewish community, Baha'is, Buddhists, Hindus, Sikhs even, and it deepens my faith and my understanding of what it means to walk it on this existence. With that said, there's some very real challenges that different faith communities do face. What are some, Jen, what are some challenges that the Muslim community faces in regards to even, and you spoke about xenophobia, but what are some concerns facing the Muslim community around housing and education and workforce development that city employees could know a little bit more about and be better informed to do something as they work with the Muslim population in Wisconsin or Milwaukee?
Well, I think, you know, the issues that are of concern to the general public and the city of Milwaukee are of concerns to the Muslim community, because, you know, we are residents in Wisconsin, and the vast majority of Muslim students are actually in the, you know, the public school system. And so having strong public schools is a priority for us. Having, you know, great teachers and great resources and opportunities as well. Also, housing is, and I've worked, you know, with fair housing for quite a while as well. That's always an important issue, because there have been many times where Muslims have been discriminated against when it comes to housing. When individuals see that it's a Muslim family, they decide that, you know, oh, this is no longer available. It is particularly the case that we have seen among even some of our refugee communities, not just the immigrant communities, but also the refugee communities. I think, you know, again, and for teachers and education, making sure, and whether it's housing or whatever the case is, you know, being informed, being literate about a community, especially a growing community. The Muslim community is growing. I mean, I grew up in Milwaukee. I lived here almost all of my life. I came when I was 3 years of age, and I remember, you know, having as a child having our holiday prayers where there were like 100 people. Now we're talking about 7, 8, 9,000 people coming together. You know, we didn't have a single mosque. There was one that was you know, a mosque on what was then 3rd Street. Now it's Martin Luther King Boulevard. It was a small mosque, mainly African Americans, African American community. Now we're talking just in the greater Milwaukee area. I think we have like 9, 10 mosques, and, you know, numerous organizations and establishments. So it's a growing community. It's a vibrant community. It's important to be literate about this community. You know, again, Uthman had mentioned the Pew Research. The Pew Research also has said that when it comes to xenophobia and Islamophobia, that against Muslims, Muslim women make up 85% of the victims, particularly those that wear hijab and are evident. So I think it is also very important to make sure that we have systems in place that are going to protect these families, to protect women, to protect girls, to make sure that the bullying that sometimes takes place in school as a result of dress, as a result of these types of things. I think that these all need to be addressed through education and through resources, and just like this event today, you're starting with people that work at the commission. But I think it's really important for us to reach into all of the different establishments.
Yeah, thank you so much, Janan. And as you were talking about that, I was thinking about just my parents came here in 1982, so not that long ago. But yeah, how we had to pray inside people's houses, and then got a spot, then rented a spot, and then built a spot, and then just how much of a struggle it is just to kind of create some sort of identity. But at the same time, you have so many, and as Athman pointed out, you have so many young youth and those that are just appreciative to be given that opportunity and wanting to give back and wanting to serve. And that's part of who they are, and that's also part of their faith. That's part of their religious faith. And I think a lot of people don't understand just how much of a component service is to the Muslim community. And so with that said, Athman, I want to ask you a little bit about, we might have a lot of people from the city or city employees. What are some social disparities that you are aware of that because you served on numerous civil rights commission boards and have had discussions around policing and law enforcement and housing and workforce development as well. What are some things that we can kind of consider for the Muslim community on how city employees can maybe help or assist or be aware of?
No, I think to kind of echo what Janan was saying, I think ultimately it comes about through greater understanding. If we, and especially where the Muslim community now has some new refugee groups, let's say, that came into the city of Milwaukee. So we have the Rohingya from Burma or Burmese. We have some Somali, we have others. I think it's just a matter of being able to understand some of the different backgrounds and cultures that are part of a particular community, and being able to to deal with some of those individuals and the issues they may have. Sometimes they may be limitations that they may have. Sometimes it would be certain requests and so forth that may be peculiar to a particular community. Ultimately, I think it comes down to being aware and being able to understand and appreciate these different groups. And in the end, and this is, and again, I appreciate the Equal Rights Commission as well for bringing this together. I mean, the whole basis of our country here is that we all have equal rights, that just because someone happens to be of a different background or a certain belief or unbelief or ethnicity or whatever, the law applies equally to everyone. And we need to make sure that the law applies equally to everyone, that everyone has the same opportunities, that everyone is free from any kind of bullying or prejudice or things of that sort. And so ultimately there's an education component to it, and then there's a legal component that enforces that that aspect of it about the equality of all of us.
Thank you, Athman. And yes, that cultural component. There's obviously a legal component. There is the constitutional component, as far as just this country being a place where we wanted to be welcoming of everyone and wanted to ensure equal rights for everyone. Janan, from kind of a personal perspective, there are changing demographics, there are changing neighborhoods. If And what are some specific ways that somebody can be sensitive if they have a Muslim neighbor that's moving in, or maybe they got a Muslim supervisor or a Muslim employee with that personal, what are some specific ways that somebody can be sensitive to um, having a personal relationship with somebody of the Muslim faith?
Well, I don't think there should be any special, that anyone should receive some kind of special treatment. I think what we're all looking for is to be treated just like everybody else. We're part of the community, and we want to all we want is just what everybody else wants. We want to have a good job. We want to live in a comfortable home, be able to educate our children, make sure that our children are well cared for, that our city is thriving, that the people in the city are thriving, that we have the amenities and the resources that any city would want. So I don't think that what we want is really different than anybody else. But what I would say is that if individuals are are cautious or fearful or kind of unsure because they don't have a lot of information, or they have really been privy to a lot of the negative rhetoric about Islam and Muslims, we are more than happy. Heck, you guys, honestly, anybody that talks to us will get sick of us, because I really don't know too many people that don't like to talk, that don't like to chat, that don't want to sit down and have a meal together. We're a very, very community oriented faith group, and we're all about big extended families. We're all about bringing everyone into the circle to enjoy themselves. So if people have questions, really the best way is just to reach out to your neighbor, reach out and find out some of the basics. Of course, if you're talking about sensitivity, don't bring over a bottle of wine if they're practicing Muslim. Practicing Muslims don't drink wine or eat pork. So there are also certain, sometimes among practicing Muslims, there's certain guidelines when it comes to gender and things like that. If they are practicing, we don't usually, kiss and hug people of the opposite sex if they're not related to us. Again, it's sometimes, though, it depends on the individuals as well. So I don't want to give one blanket statement, because it also ranges, and Muslims are not one homogeneous type. You have everyone from ultra liberal to ultra conservative, and everything in between. And so I think, just like anybody else or any other community or any other faith group, it's just a matter of really putting in the effort to get to know that person one-on-one.
Yeah, thank you, Jen. And let's talk a little bit more about those cultural sensitivities that you brought up. I think, we think about, you think about Ramadan, you think about just this month, Ramadan, and what that all feels like, and what the Muslim community is going through, the diet, the halal, fasting, understanding of personal space and contact. And can we talk a little bit about some of those cultural sensitivities, Othman? Let's just get into some of those cultural sensitivities. And I know it's hard to say, because, as you pointed out, that the Muslim faith is such a big umbrella. It is such a huge umbrella, such a huge population, and for any faith, for any people or culture, right? You can't label and say, well, Pardeep is a representative of all six, because somebody would say, well, no, Pardeep doesn't represent all six. He might be a bit more liberal, and or whatever that is. So I think there's a danger to pigeonholing. But for this, I just want to offer some cultural sensitivities that may or may not be true to you or somebody else of the Muslim faith, that somebody can go home with and say, okay, I need to learn more about that. And Othman, you can start that conversation. Then Janan, you want to add to that?
I guess I've never really looked at it just as cultural sensitivities. I look at it more of just, respecting other people's faith traditions. So if I happen to have a Catholic neighbor who during Lent is not, consuming certain foods, I mean, why should it bother me? I mean, that's part of their faith. Or on Ash Wednesday, if, they go to the church and the priest, puts the ashes on their forehead, why should that bother me? I mean, if that is where they get some spiritual, let's say, part of their spiritual tradition satisfaction, it's fine. And so for us, for example, for Ramadan, we fast from dawn until sunset. Dawn is about an hour or so before sunrise. And it's a fast of where you're controlling your natural desires. You're not eating, you're not drinking, no, not taking liquids. Is it challenging? Yeah, it's challenging, but you're doing your regular work during the day. It doesn't mean, if I work at the city, I'm supposed to take, time off. No, you do your regular work, and it's just part of a tradition, part of the belief, part of self-control, part of empathizing with the poor. There's a lot of things behind it. Muslims also, those who are devout, will pray 5 times a day. Again, this is from a legal perspective. Employers are supposed to provide what's called reasonable accommodation. And again, I don't want to go into a legal lecture here, but if it doesn't impact the employer in any negative way, there has to be reasonable accommodation. And so if a person says, you know what, I needed to take 5 minutes out during a break to pray, that shouldn't be an issue. Obviously, if that person works on an assembly line, that's not reasonable accommodation. It would be unreasonable for that person to request, oh, I need to take time off right now. But all of these, again, I just think are respecting other people's traditions, especially when these traditions don't negatively impact others. They may not impact others at all. It's just people want to follow things. And again, the same thing applies to every other religious tradition. So if someone happens to be an Orthodox Jew and it's the Sabbath, there may be certain rules that they may follow. Same thing with whether it's the Sikh community, the Hindu community, different, whether, Christian communities from different denominations. It's just a matter of, what, if this is what people want to do, it's not hurting anyone, it's not harming anyone. It is part of their tradition. Our country is based on appreciating people who have these different views, and the difference. It's part of the fabric of our country that we can be different but still be united as a nation. And some of the polarization that you see in our country and the negativity that's out there, and taking a broad brush and taking what one person does and trying to to use it to apply to an entire religion or ethnicity or community. I mean, that's just unfair and it's unreasonable. And I think that that's creating some of the tension that we see in our country.
Yeah. Thank you. And it shouldn't bother us. We should actually appreciate it. We should actually want people to live their faith. But for some people they feel whatever, type of way. We can't control everybody's feelings around it, but we can try to educate them on how that lived part of their faith helps to bring their whole self to work. I forget what city we were in, but a woman talked about not bringing herself and her faith to work. She would put her faith and her job inside the car, and then walk into work, and then walk back out and put it back on, and then go home. And I think that employers need to understand, if somebody is compartmentalizing themselves for work and they're saying, hey, I know that you're not going to accept all of me, then how can you ask them to bring their full self? How can you ask them if they're feeling that they're not valued or appreciated for all of everything that they bring? How can they bring all of themselves? How can they feel safe? So I think as we build this, there's definitely a responsibility to everybody that's in those positions of authority and of leadership, to say, how do I build a more loving, inclusive environment, genuinely? Not so I can check off a box and say, hey, I had, we did this discussion, or we had this training, but how are people genuinely feeling? And I think that there's a lot of people who are going to have that conversation. I'm glad that the Equal Rights Commission is having it right now. But as we have that going forward, and same question for you, Janine, like, well, some of the, and yeah, for lack of a better word right now, I'll just call them sort of cultural sensitivities out there.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think to an extent also religious practices, and it's interesting because what you mentioned about the woman that took her hijab off in order to go to work and then came back, that's actually not so unusual, and it's rather sad. But we also live in a society where now we've finally, after centuries, come to terms with the fact that some people just can't get can't come to terms with the fact that there are people that have black skin, and there's still that racism out there. So imagine when you're doing something very different, like coming, in a hijab. And it's again, it's a matter of education, and it's a matter of using the same yardstick for everyone, because when Muslim women, this is our public kind of attire, and we believe it's part of our faith and part of our modesty, dress in public. What's interesting is that when you see a Catholic nun in a habit, or you see a Mennonite woman, or an Amish woman, an Orthodox Jewish woman, people say, oh, that's their religion. But when they see Muslim women, there's still that stereotype that somehow, oh, that's not religion, that's just oppression, and so again, it's a matter of education, it's a matter of helping people to understand. And I think at some point, and I'm seeing it more with that second generation and third generation, where they don't feel like they are sort of visitors here, or individuals that, I remember talking with some older women sometimes, a couple of times, about issues that they encountered with people being very, racist to them. And one of them said, although she's a citizen, tax-paying citizen, she said, well, we should probably be happy that they let us in their country. I said, the fact that you came later and some people just came a generation or two before you doesn't make you less than a citizen and less of a person that should be able to have the rights and the opportunities that everyone else has. So I think that our second generation, third generation don't have that attitude. They see themselves very American, and they're really they're ready to go after their rights, and they're not willing to put up with that. But when you talk about, some of the cultural things, especially in work, in places of work, schools, etc., I think, you mentioned an important one for practicing Muslims. 5 prayers a day is very important. And when you're at work, that means that 1, maybe 2, maybe even 3 prayers, but at least 2 prayers will usually take place during the work time. And so, you get time off for breaks anyhow. And so Muslims will usually use that time. But I think providing them a place that's a little bit quiet, that's comfortable, that is safe in order to do their prayers, is just being very respectful, and Muslims will wash to prepare for their prayers. And so having, access, of course, to bathrooms, and then being able to go for their prayers, that should not disrupt anything. That doesn't, on the contrary, there's all evidence that when an employee realizes that you really respect them, they just give you not 100%, they'll give you 200%, and my kids always tell me, Mom, there's nothing called 200%, but anyhow, they'll give you their all. Something also to keep in mind is that, there are some that are very conservative that might not even shake hands. I think that's important to note. So just again, to get to know the people that you're working with, having parties, holiday parties is often common. Having birthday parties, going out sometimes for drinks is common in American culture. So don't look at it that these Muslims are being unsocial. They don't drink, and they don't feel comfortable sitting in a place where there's a lot of alcohol, and I think that that if you're going to have a party, maybe also sometimes having an area where you know, people are not drinking alcohol. So these are things that, again, it's about talking to your employee, to talking to that person, getting to know them. There's a private school that my kids went to, and you know, they have a particular attire that they have to wear, and then they got some Muslim girls that came, and they were trying to figure out, well, how do they wear the uniform, because it's not in compliance. Most of these, you know, they put them in really short skirts and things like that. So they contacted me, and I said, you know what, just let them get the material and make the kind of outfit using the same material. You have to be you have to be flexible, or otherwise allow them to wear pants under these jumpers. And so the school was very accommodating, and I think that that's just what we have to do. Honestly, you know, these things are not difficult. Imagine if somebody has diabetes, if somebody has, you know, we have an ASL interpreter here because we're trying to accommodate people. These are not difficult things to accommodate. We can do it if we have the will to do it.
Yeah, thank you so much. And reasonable accommodation, as Ahmed pointed out, a lot of times there's, within the Democratic National Convention that was happening last year, there was reasonable accommodations made. Workplace, there's reasonable accommodations made to make, and really as a society, can we get better at building bigger tables? Can we just say, okay, like this is how? And I was thinking about your children, and then saying there's no such thing as 200%. You know, the thing is, when you have that sort of, okay, like when you first come over, and both of your parents came over, and then you became the next generation and the generation after that. I think the first generation that comes over, they're like straight up 300%. They're like, there is a 300%, and I'm doing it. Right? I got 4 jobs, and I'm trying to work, and I don't got time for, there's a lot of things they don't have time for, right? But they try to make time because it's important. Then the next generation after that, like, okay, we can ease up a little bit because we're not going to be able to work like them. And then the next generation is like, okay, you did all the work. So I don't know, there's 200%. I'm like, maybe their 100% is like your 200%. So we'll just say, okay, children, just give us 100% and don't go down from that.
Exactly.
But you talk, and maybe the last question I really want to ask you both, just maybe a deeply personal question, because I think I kind of feel it as well. Parents immigrated, they were the first, right? And then I was children, so we were born in a different country. We came over at a very young age, very, very similar to everything that we're experiencing right now. But how much of a responsibility do you both feel towards the next generation? How much of a responsibility do you feel, whether it was specifically told to you by your parents or not told to you, but just because you were a newer immigrant to this country, to say, I need to pave the way, I need to show up for this event and that event, and I need to be here and I need to educate them. But how much of a responsibility, and maybe I loaded the question up already, often, how much of a responsibility do you feel to the upcoming generation of Muslim Americans?
I think it's a great responsibility. And I don't know if Janan will have a different point of view, because I think her experience is going to be similar to mine because of the parentage. But I think we see a great responsibility. Honestly, I saw my parents involved from the very beginning, and they did their best. And they were involved with the founding of the Islamic organizations, and got involved in so many different things. And honestly, that's where I think I ultimately got my desire to do the same thing. I mean, I was a practicing attorney for 20 years. I then kind of merged into the Islamic Society of Milwaukee. I also teach in our school for seniors. And I'll tell you, and again, for me, it's very personal, because growing up, especially with a lot of other immigrants who had different views, who were not fully, they didn't grow up here. They brought in a lot of cultural baggage, and I had difficulty. I mean, I'll be very frank. It was not easy, especially when some had some very conservative, rigid views, and I had difficulty in navigating a lot of that. And so, what I felt, not only for my kids, but in the community, that I have a responsibility as someone who grew up here in this country, who, thank God, was able to be, successful in many different ways, to give back, so that a lot of the young people don't have the same difficulties, especially those coming from refugee families and backgrounds, that they're able to adjust, that they don't have that double identity that I think a lot of immigrants have, that you don't feel that you're fully back home and you don't feel that you're fully here. And I want them to feel that they're 100%, they're living in this country, they're part of the society, they have the rights of everyone else in the society. They're they could do anything that anyone else in the society can do. And I want them to be very, very comfortable with that identity. And because I had that experience, and I feel that I can actually translate that experience to them and kind of empower them and have them feel that enthusiasm and that drive. For me, if I can get that, convey that to the youth, I see that as a responsibility. But if I can convey that, and I feel that these students and these young people fully are engaged in our society, and they want to go out themselves and give back to the society and give back to the community. And when I say community, I'm saying everyone. When I see that, that makes me happy, and it makes it all worthwhile to me. And it even makes my decision to basically kind of leave the law practice, where I can actually have an impact on working with people and molding the young people in a better way. It brings me a great deal of satisfaction.
Thank you, Atman. And yeah, the sense of belonging and people that they matter genuinely. Yeah. And Janan, same question. How much of a responsibility do you feel?
Yeah, definitely. I think, as Athman said, being raised with the parents we had who were among the founders of the Islamic Society, who, I remember as a young person, when we would go places, or that sense of pride that they had. I think it is a huge responsibility. I think that what I also, really try to gear myself towards is helping to try and instill within these kids the idea also that you can be unapologetically American. You can be, while also being unapologetically Muslim, while being unapologetically whatever your ethnic background is. For me, it's Palestinian, and all of them bring a richness. I think that one of the things that we learned, at least from the way that many, and this is I think the immigrant story in general, is where a lot of times parents are so fearful that, for example, their children are going to lose their language, they're going to lose their faith, they're going to lose things. So they create this bubble, and limit sort of sometimes the interactions for their children because they're so concerned about that. I think that what we've been able to realize is that no, you can navigate all of that and still be who you are. But I think it's also society to some extent that has left this impression that if you don't dress a certain way, if you don't think a certain way, if you don't have a certain faith, that you're less than, or you're the other, or you're not quite up there. And so our kids want to be part of all of this, and but we just need to help them to navigate that, to be able to do that. And I also, my background is microbiology. I've worked in hospitals, but the most fulfilling part really of my life has been the work that I'm doing to help people understand our faith, understand our traditions, so that we are dispelling that kind of fear, and really making it, hopefully, making it a better place for our children and eventually their children to be Americans, yet be who they are as well.
Thank you, Janae, and thank you so much for living your faith and for just hearing that call, heeding that call, and and never running from those responsibilities. So, and as hard as heavy as they may be, I see Steve. Steve has a question. Brother Steve, are you on? Can you unmute yourself and ask the question? I wonder if that's possible.
He actually put a question in the chat, I believe.
In the chat? Okay, I'll ask. So the question from Steve is, the US government spends lots of money bombing Muslims in several countries for no good reason. How does the US Muslim community respond to this? Is there fear of backlash if someone speaks out? And I'll leave it up.
I would, I guess if I just maybe answer just real quickly, there's events and problems that take place all over the world. And to be very frank, we have an opinion on it. We're going to express our opinion. If there is something that we feel is unfair foreign policy, someone, is being attacked, we will express it, just like we will condemn anyone who claims to speak in the name of Islam, and will do something. I mean, living in this country, what's great is that we do have that freedom of speech. We do have the ability to express ourselves, to try to actually get a change to improve the government in different areas, whether it happens to be race, whether it happens to be equal rights, whether it happens to be foreign policy. The biggest issue for us as a Muslim community, and especially as Muslim institutions, when there is an event that takes place outside, is obviously a security related issue. And this is true for, I think, a few other groups as well. Oftentimes we have to have the police are actually on site, just because we're receiving calls, letters, threats, and things of that sort. But you know what? We can't let us dissuade those kind of things dissuade us from speaking the truth of what we feel, expressing our opinions. Again, that is the true tradition of America. You express your views, and you will let people know what you think is the best way of moving forward.
If I can also jump in, because that is such an important question. And as we do know, there have been so many, bombings. I mean, we bombed Iraq into the Stone Age, killed just hundreds of thousands, devastated the country. Why? For those, because they had weapons of mass destruction that didn't exist. And so we have been involved in really too many immoral wars. The subjugation of Palestinians, basically, keeping only to one side and not being a fair broker. This is causing and has caused havoc for over 70 years among the Palestinians. So there are many. I think what we need to understand is that prior to all of these wars, people, Muslims and people within that region have been really characterized in a way to make them less than human. And so this idea of creating a monster so that we can say, well, they don't believe in the ideals that we believe. They really have don't like our freedoms. They want to just simply attack us. This is all part of the policy of creating someone that then American society will be okay when their government wants to go and bomb these civilians and bomb these human beings and kill and wreak havoc. So I think that we need to be smarter. I think we need to hold our government accountable. We need to not allow others to think for ourselves, for us. We need to research things ourselves. I just want, for example, before, and I know we're running out of time, but there's so much now animosity towards Iran, for example. Let's go back and just learn about the history of Iran and how we overthrew the CIA. The CIA overthrew a democratic government and installed a dictator in Iran that ruled for decades. And so why does Iran not trust us? So we need to know that relationships and things that are happening don't happen in a vacuum. We need to understand our history.
Yeah, thank you, Janae, and thank you, Othman. I think that when we talk about the language of war and bombings and harm and hurt and dehumanization, we have to understand that we didn't just get to 2021 by accident, that there has been things that have happened throughout our history that have gotten us here. And we don't get to a place where we're this polarized and we're this divided on just issues that matter to the world. And somehow, some way, we need a reawakening of a spiritual consciousness. And we have gotten away from our faith, we have gotten away from God, we have gotten away from all of that. And the narrative that exists right now is one that is very, very dangerous. It is dangerous to small ethnic minorities all over the world. And if you're an ethnic minority here, it's dangerous to you. If you're an ethnic minority somewhere else, well, wherever you are a minority, and it's easy to dehumanize and scapegoat and use all of these tactics. So I think that whenever we start to hear that language, we need to be attuned to it, and we need to call it out, and we need to say, okay, what who are these people? These are people that are human beings. There are children. There are doctors. These are real people that are suffering the consequences of us or other people dehumanizing. And I thought there was another question. Rebecca, did you have a question, or did you have your hands up?
I did. And I know we're coming towards an end. So I was raised in a Carpatho-Rusin Orthodox household and had traditions where my mother and my sister, we sat on one side of the church, where my brothers and my father sat on the other side of the church with the men, and us women were on the other side. We covered our heads as well. And we had all these traditions, but through the years, they've gone through the wayside. And just kind of like within the Catholic Church too, you had mentioned about the nuns. What are you doing to make sure that you're keeping those traditions within your faith?
That's a great question, Rebecca. Thank you very much. I think what is important, and this is probably a central tenet of Islamic belief, that there are certain things that change, certain practice. I don't want to say specific practices, but certain understandings that can change according to, let's say, when science brings forth more knowledge, when society kind of brings forth more knowledge. But there are also certain aspects of the faith that don't change, because that's really part of who we are. And it's important for us, for people then to if they are free. Of course, there's a freedom of faith and practice, and they're free to practice or not to practice, but we don't continue to change the faith and rewrite our scripture to fit people's whims. People are required to really understand what the reasoning is for why we practice those particular things. And so what's very interesting is that there was a period of time, when many Muslim countries, particularly this was after World War I, were under colonialist rule. And many of the colonialist powers went into some of these countries, and it was, it's almost kind of like, what happened here with the First Nations and the Native American Indians. sort of wanting to impose their understanding and their viewpoint of what is really feminism, what is, what does democracy look like, while at the same time they continue to oppress and continue to impose certain rules. And so there was a period of time where in many Muslim countries, women were stopped wearing hijab. It was only very rural areas where a lot of people moved away from their faith. But then as one country after the other let go and were able to remove a lot of these colonialist powers, what's been happening is almost like a resurgence of the practice of Islam. And so, and it's coming in a way where people are very proud of it, because now it's not just a cultural practice that has been carried down where people might not understand it, especially when we have lived in countries where we've had to explain ourselves. It's come with an understanding because we've had to understand it in order to explain it to others. And so there's this resurgence and pride that's coming as a result. And on the contrary, rather than seeing it sort of dissipate, we're seeing a greater practice.
Thank you.
And often maybe the same question of what are you doing to kind of preserve the faith and make sure that it maybe within the cultural inclusion of America, there sometimes is a assimilation process of losing one's faith.
I think a lot of the religious practices, if there are changes, it takes time for Islamic practices to change, because we don't really have a religious hierarchy. You need a consensus of scholars to make a particular change take place, which means that is something that may take a long time, and it may be gradual, especially when it comes to certain matters. I think there's certain fundamentals, like Janan said, that are not, going to change because it is part and parcel of the practice. There are other things though that can, and again, this is where it's Islam. They say historically, they say that Islam in China looks Chinese, Islam in France looks French, because it's able to accommodate different cultures. So when you say that, to dress modestly, well, the way that someone dresses modestly in, for example, Jordan may be very different than the way someone dresses modestly in Milwaukee. And again, the idea that Islam is like the flow of a stream and it reflects the bedrock of what's beneath it. And so it shines differently depending on where it is. And yet the essence of it ends up, remaining the same. I also look at, the others that I speak to as part of the interfaith conference and interfaith work. I speak to Catholics and people from the Orthodox faith, and there are always going to be some changes. Some will be generational. Some are going to be very difficult, to change. But I'll just give you one. I mean, like in the Catholic Church, the language that was ultimately used, if it was originally, the Mass was in Latin, eventually it had to change to English. Well, in our facilities, the overwhelming majority of our sermon has to be in English, because that's the only common language that all of the people are going to understand, although some of the prayers and so forth are done obviously in Arabic. So sometimes there has to be some change, but certainly not in the fundamentals.
Yeah, thank you so much. And I was thinking about Islam in India looks very desi.
Yeah.
So within the interfaith and interreligious and the work that we do, there is a lot of culture, ethnicity, language, traditions, history, as well as the faith. And so all that is a very complex soup of our existence, but meeting people where they are and valuing people for who they are is the core of God's grace and God's love. So I thank you for both being on with us and expressing that through everything that you both embody. And we wish you both blessings as you go forward. And I want to thank Mahua, Rebecca, the Equal Rights Commission, everyone that was on this call, everyone that will see it via live. Thank you for joining us today. And just want to encourage everyone to join all of the discussions around lunchtime learning and how we learn about each other and how we navigate this world.
I want to also just thank you, Pardeep and Maihua and Rebecca and all of those involved for giving us really this great opportunity to be able to reach out and educate others. And so definitely appreciate that, and thank you very much.
Yes, thank you very much, Maihua, Pardeep, Rebecca, and there's Rebecca. Now I see you, and everyone that attended. This is the best way for us to get to know each other.
Well, on behalf of the Equal Rights Commission, we also thank you all very, very much for sharing your time and your faith and your community with us, because without this, how can we start introducing understanding of each other to our community? And so thank you, Pardeep, for volunteering to moderate our Lunch and Learn today. And Janan and Othman, thank you very much. I am learning. Janan, as you said earlier, we've known each other for years, but I've never really get to listen and learn. And so 1 hour is just not enough, just not to justify enough time to really learn about the Muslim community and the diversity in the Muslim community and the faith. And so this is really a very beginning stages for me. And I hope that our audience that are with us today can also take this back and build on from here so that we can all understand each other. Because listening to all of you, I relate to everything because I was an immigrant child and also coming from a different culture, learning, I relate to everything and it's not unique. And so thank you all. Thank you, our language interpreters, sign language interpreters. Thank you for our captioner. Thank you, everyone. We look forward to having you join us again next month. Next month will be on May 20th over the lunch hour again. So every third Thursday of the month for the remainder of this year, we will have a topic. And so we invite everyone to come back and join us and learn along with us. Thank you, everyone. I hope that you will have a really wonderful the rest of your day.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone. Thank you so much.
Bye-bye.
I want to thank both of you. Pardeep's gone already, but thank you both very much. I greatly appreciate it. Talking about traditions and religion with me growing up Carpathian Russian Orthodox, which was unique when I was growing up, and I can remember never wearing slacks at church. So I remember changes going on. So that was my question in the back of my head, just some of the things that I've seen that have changed, like Slavonic no longer being sung on a consistent basis in the church, only for holidays and for the Mass for the Dead. So it was very enlightening and I really enjoyed it. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And I think you should be a guest sometime. I would love to learn more about you.
We will eventually get around to everything else.
Yeah.
There's so much to cover.
You're right.
Becky,
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, folks.
Okay.
Thank you very much. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.